I was sitting in my truck when the call came through. 3 rings, then Lauren's voice, tight with something I couldn't name yet. "Dad, you need to come to the hospital, now." No explanation, just that tone, the one that meant things had already gone wrong, and I was being summoned to witness the aftermath. I was 47 years old, had worked logistics coordination for nearly 2 decades, and I knew when someone was managing information flow. This was that. "What happened?" "Just come. St. Mary's, 4th floor." I drove through evening traffic with my hands steady on the wheel, running scenarios. My son David was 28, married 3 years to a woman named Jessica who smiled with her teeth but never her eyes. They'd announced the pregnancy at Thanksgiving dinner, Jessica's hand resting on her stomach like she was already posing for the photo. David had looked proud in that desperate way men do when they're trying to convince themselves everything's going according to plan. The hospital parking garage smelled like concrete and antiseptic. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, using the time to settle my breathing. 4th floor, maternity wing. The waiting area was empty except for David, sitting with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He looked up when I approached, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not grief, not shock. Something colder. "Dad, what happened?" "Jessica lost the baby." His voice was flat, practiced. "She's been bleeding for hours. They tried to stop it, but..." I sat down beside him, keeping space between us. "I'm sorry." He nodded, still not looking at me. "The doctors said it happens sometimes. Spontaneous miscarriage. 12 weeks?" I waited. There was more coming. I could feel it building in the silence between us, the way you feel pressure change before a storm. "They asked questions," David said, "about stress, about her environment, about what might have triggered it." "And?" Jessica told them about the argument. My chest tightened. "What argument?" "At dinner, last week, when you came over." Now he looked at me, and his eyes were hard. "She told them how you upset her, how you raised your voice, how she was shaking afterward." I replayed last Tuesday in my mind. David's apartment, pasta dinner, Jessica complaining about her mother-in-law not respecting boundaries. I'd pointed out, calmly, I thought, that maybe announcing the pregnancy on social media before telling family in person wasn't the best approach. Jessica had gone quiet. David had changed the subject. I'd left an hour later thinking the whole thing was minor. "I didn't raise my voice." "She said you did." "David, I was there. I kept my voice level. I disagreed with her, but I was respectful about it." "That's not how she remembers it." He stood up, putting physical distance between us now. The doctor said extreme stress can contribute to miscarriage. Jessica was already high risk. And you..." "I what?" "You pushed her. You always push, Dad. You think you know better than everyone else, and you can't just let things go." I stood up too, slowly. "That's not what happened." "I'm not arguing about semantics. I'm telling you the truth." A nurse walked past, glancing at us. David lowered his voice. "Jessica's parents are on their way. When they get here, I think you should leave." "You think I should leave?" "Yeah, I do." I looked at my son, really looked at him, saw the way he was holding his shoulders, the set of his jaw, the careful distance he was maintaining. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a position he'd already taken, a decision he'd already made. I was being cast in a role I'd never auditioned for. "When did you decide this?" I asked. "Decide what?" "That I was responsible." "Nobody's saying that." "You just did. You're saying I caused enough stress to..." "I'm saying you didn't help." His voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion I'd heard. "I'm saying you could have just kept your opinions to yourself for once. I'm saying maybe if you had, we'd still have our baby." The words hung between us like smoke. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, to make him understand that correlation wasn't causation, that grief was making him irrational. But I looked at his face and realized it wouldn't matter. He needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said. "Both of you, but I didn't cause this. You should go." I went. 3 days later, a detective called my office. His name was Raymond Pierce, and he had questions about my relationship with my daughter-in-law. "Standard procedure," he said, just following up on some statements. "Would I mind coming down to the station?" I went alone. That was my first mistake. The interview room was exactly what you'd expect. Gray walls, metal table, chairs bolted to the floor. Detective Pierce was mid-40s, carrying 20 extra pounds around his middle, wearing a tie that had seen better decades. He had a file folder in front of him that he didn't open. "Thanks for coming in, Mr. Coleman. This shouldn't take long." "Happy to help." You're aware that your daughter-in-law, Jessica Coleman, suffered a miscarriage on Monday evening? Yes, my son called me to the hospital. And you were there? At the hospital? For about 15 minutes. Then David asked me to leave? Pierce nodded, making a note. Can you tell me about your relationship with Jessica? It's fine, normal. She's been married to my son for 3 years. No conflicts, no tension? I hesitated. That was my second mistake. We had a disagreement last week, minor, about family communication. Jessica characterizes it differently. She says you became verbally aggressive with her in her own home. That's not accurate. She says you raised your voice, used intimidating body language, and made her feel unsafe. I did none of those things. She says she was so upset afterward that she couldn't sleep, that she had anxiety attacks for the next 3 days, that her doctor had to prescribe medication. I felt the room closing in. Detective, I had a calm conversation with my daughter-in-law about social media etiquette. I didn't threaten her. I didn't intimidate her. I disagreed with her, and apparently that was enough to... Enough to what? I stopped myself. Pierce was leaning forward now, eyes sharp. I'd almost walked right into it. Enough to make her misremember the interaction, I finished, or enough to cause significant stress to a pregnant woman who then suffered a miscarriage. Miscarriages aren't caused by single arguments. Medical literature suggests extreme stress can be a contributing factor. I'm not a doctor. Neither am I. Pierce opened the file now, scanning something. But I've got statements here from Jessica, from your son David, and from Jessica's mother, who says Jessica called her immediately after you left that night, crying and hyperventilating. My hands were flat on the table. I kept them there, visible, calm. I'd like to see those statements. This isn't a trial, Mr. Coleman. This is a conversation. Then I'm free to leave? Of course, but I'm trying to understand what happened here. A young woman loses her baby, and she says it's because her father-in-law deliberately caused her stress. That's a serious allegation. What exactly are you investigating? Pierce closed the file. Reckless endangerment. Possibly more, depending on how the DA wants to pursue it. The room tilted slightly. You're saying I'm being charged with something? I'm saying we're building a case, and I'm giving you an opportunity to tell your side. I just did. You said you had a disagreement. Jessica says you attacked her verbally, knowing she was pregnant, knowing she had anxiety issues, deliberately trying to upset her. Which version am I supposed to believe? The one that's true. And how do I know which that is? I stood up. Am I under arrest? Not at this time. Then I'm leaving, and if you want to talk to me again, you'll do it through my attorney. I walked out. That was my third mistake, thinking I had any control over what came next. The attorney I hired was named Patricia Vernon, 56 years old, specialized in criminal defense, had a reputation for being aggressive in court and expensive everywhere else. She listened to my account without interrupting, took notes in precise handwriting, and then looked at me like I'd shown up to surgery without insurance. Here's the situation, she said. They have 3 corroborating witnesses saying you verbally assaulted a pregnant woman. They have medical records showing she sought treatment for anxiety immediately afterward. They have the miscarriage, which happened within the medically relevant time frame. And they have you, a man with no witnesses, no recording, no proof of your version. So I'm guilty because I can't prove I'm innocent? You're vulnerable because the narrative works against you. Overbearing father-in-law, young pregnant woman, tragic outcome. It's emotionally compelling. And the DA is up for re-election. This is insane. This is reality. Patricia leaned back in her chair. The charge would likely be reckless endangerment or negligent infliction of emotional distress. Not murder, not manslaughter, but enough to put you in prison for 18 months to 2 years if they can make it stick. On what evidence? On testimony. On circumstantial pattern. I stared at the law degree on her wall, the framed certificates, the bookshelf full of case law. None of it mattered. The system wasn't designed for truth. It was designed for stories, and my son was telling a better story than I was. What do I do? We fight. We challenge their timeline. We question Jessica's credibility. We present you as a concerned father who had a normal disagreement and that got weaponized after tragedy struck. We make the jury see reasonable doubt. And if they don't? Patricia's expression didn't change. Then you should prepare yourself for the possibility of prison. The preliminary hearing was 4 months later. I spent that time working, sleeping poorly, and watching my life reorganize itself around the space where my son used to be. David didn't call, didn't return messages, didn't acknowledge my existence except through his attorney's motions and filings. My wife Ellen stood by me. That was the one piece of solid ground I had. She'd been there that night, though she'd been in the kitchen most of the dinner, cleaning up while I talked with David and Jessica in the living room. She couldn't testify to what I'd said or how I'd said it, but she could testify to the atmosphere, the tone, the absence of any dramatic confrontation. The prosecution blocked her testimony as biased and immaterial. The hearing itself was brief. Jessica testified, crying on cue, describing how I'd loomed over her and used my size to intimidate her and said things about her character that made her feel worthless. David testified to finding her shaken afterward, to holding her while she sobbed, to begging me to just apologize, and I'd refused. I testified to a calm disagreement about social media boundaries. The judge bound me over for trial. The trial was scheduled for 7 months out. Patricia told me this was normal, that the system moved slowly, that we'd use the time to build our defense. What she meant was, get used to living in limbo. I went to work. I came home. I existed in the space between accusation and verdict, and I learned things about myself I hadn't known before. I learned that rage could be cold, that patience could be weaponized, that sometimes the only power you have is the power to remember everything with perfect clarity. Ellen asked me once if I was okay. No, I said. What can I do? Nothing. Just don't believe them. I don't. Good. Remember that. The trial lasted 6 days. The prosecution presented Jessica, David, Jessica's mother, Jessica's therapist, her medical records, her prescription history, and a timeline that made me look like a man who deliberately terrorized a pregnant woman for sport. Patricia presented me, my work history, character witnesses who testified I was calm and reasonable, and cross-examination that poked holes in Jessica's timeline that the jury didn't care about. They deliberated for 11 hours, guilty on 1 count of reckless endangerment. The judge sentenced me to 2 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. He said it with regret, like he was performing a sad duty rather than destroying a man's life over a conversation about Instagram. I was remanded immediately. David was in the gallery. I looked at him on my way out, looked right into his eyes, and he looked back without flinching. Whatever he felt about this, he'd made peace with it. He'd chosen Jessica's story over mine, chosen the narrative that made him the victim's husband instead of his father's son, and he was comfortable with that choice. I memorized his face, every detail, the way he held his mouth, the set of his shoulders, the wedding ring on his left hand. Then they took me away. Before we go any further, hit the hype button, take a second to subscribe and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? State prison wasn't like the movies. It was worse in some ways, better in others, but mostly just relentlessly itself. A machine designed to process human beings into smaller, quieter versions of themselves. I spent my first week in intake, being evaluated, tested, assigned, and systematically stripped of everything that made me a person outside these walls. They gave me a number, they gave me clothes, they gave me a cell with a man named Raymond Ellis who'd been inside for 4 years on fraud charges and had the calm efficiency of someone who'd learned to make prison work for him instead of against him. First time? He asked the first night. Yes. You'll figure it out. Keep your head down, don't borrow, don't lend, don't get involved in other people's business. You do your time, time does you. That's it? That's it. I spent my first month learning the rhythm. Wake at 6, breakfast at 6:30. Work detail at 7:15. I was assigned to the prison library, shelving books, processing requests, maintaining the catalog system. Lunch at noon, yard time at 1, more work at 3, dinner at 5, lockdown at 9, lights out at 10. The monotony was intentional. It was designed to make you forget who you were before, to sand away the edges of your personality until you fit neatly into the routine. I let it work on everyone else and used it differently for myself. I started paying attention. Prison is a system, and every system has rules, and every set of rules has gaps. I watched how the guards rotated. Which ones were lazy, which ones were strict, which ones could be convinced to look the other way for the right reasons. I watched how inmates organized themselves, who had power, who had information, who had connections outside. I learned that Raymond wasn't just in for fraud. He'd run a consulting business on the outside, teaching companies how to optimize their operations, identify inefficiencies, exploit regulatory loopholes. He'd gotten caught doing it for clients who were slightly too criminal, but the skills translated. "You're thinking too much," he told me one night, 3 months in. "I can see it. You've got that look like you're running calculations." Maybe I am. About what? About how things work. Things work how they're designed to work. You can't change the system. I don't want to change it. I want to understand it. Raymond smiled slightly. That's how it starts. How what starts? Whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything. Sure, you're not. But I was. I was planning everything. The first visit request came 2 weeks after I arrived. David and Jessica wanted to see me. The form said they'd driven 3 hours, were waiting in the visitation center, had scheduled the maximum allowed time. I refused. The second request came a month later. Same names, same distance, same hope that I'd change my mind. I refused. The pattern continued monthly. Every 30 days, like clockwork, David and Jessica would make the drive, fill out the paperwork, wait in the hard plastic chairs, and I would check the box marked declined and send them home. A guard asked me about it once. His name was Mitchell, 50 years old, 25 years on the job, had seen everything twice. That's your son? Yes. He comes every month with his wife, 3-hour drive each way. I know. Personal reasons. You punishing him? I looked up from the book I was cataloging. Does it matter? Might matter to you. Holding grudges in here is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Maybe, but maybe some grudges are worth holding. Mitchell shrugged. Your call just seems like a waste. It wasn't a waste. Every refusal was communication. Every declined visit was a message I was sending, loud and clear. I don't forgive you. I don't accept your version. I don't want your presence or your apologies or your attempts to feel better about what you did. I wanted them to drive 3 hours, wait in that room, and feel the door close on their hope. I wanted them to do it every month. I wanted it to hurt. The library became my world. It was quiet, organized, full of information, and minimally supervised. The librarian was a civilian employee named Helen Morris, 64 years old, 2 years from retirement, more interested in completing her crossword puzzles than monitoring inmate behavior. I made myself useful. I reorganized the filing system, I updated the catalog, I processed book requests efficiently, and helped inmates find what they needed. Helen appreciated it, and appreciation meant access. Access meant I could use the computers. They were supposed to be restricted to catalog searches only, but the security was minimal, and the monitoring was sporadic. I learned to navigate carefully, to clear my history, to work in short bursts that didn't draw attention. I learned what I could access and what would trigger flags, and I stayed inside the boundaries that kept me invisible. I started researching my son. David worked for a commercial real estate development firm called Vanguard Properties. He was a junior partner, which meant he had enough status to have his name on deals, but not enough power to control anything. He specialized in retail development, strip malls, shopping centers, mixed-use projects that required coordinating investors, contractors, city planning departments, and tenants. His name appeared on permits, on LLC filings, on business licenses, on development proposals submitted to city councils. I found his signature on documents, his photo at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, his quotes in local business journals talking about revitalizing neighborhoods and creating jobs. He was building a reputation, building a network, building a future. Jessica had started a consulting business, something vague about wellness and lifestyle coaching. She had a website with soft focus photos and testimonials from people with names like Jennifer K. and Michael R. She hosted workshops about managing stress, setting boundaries, healing from trauma. The irony was sharp enough to cut. I downloaded everything I could find. I printed what I could print. I memorized what I couldn't print. I built a map of their lives, their businesses, their connections, their vulnerabilities. Raymond caught me once, late in the evening, reviewing a printout of corporate filings. What's that? I folded it away. Research. For what? A project. You're in prison. You don't get to have projects? Everyone has projects. He sat down across from me. Let me guess. Your son put you here, and now you're figuring out how to return the favor. I didn't answer. Word of advice, Raymond said. Revenge is expensive. You spend it here. He tapped his temple. And you never get it back. Trust me, I know. You got revenge on someone? No, I learned not to. The people who screwed me over, they moved on. They forgot about me the day I got arrested. And I spent 2 years obsessing over payback that would never happen, because by the time I got out, they wouldn't even remember my name. This is different. It's never different. I looked at him directly. My son sent me to prison to cover for his wife's lie. Every month they drive here to ease their guilt, and every month I send them away so they can't. I'm not obsessing over revenge. I'm just making sure they don't forget what they did. And when you get out, then we'll see. Raymond studied me for a long moment. You're not the type I thought you were when you got here. What type did you think I was? The type that breaks. You're the other type. What's the other type? The kind that adapts. He was right. I was adapting. I was learning prison the way I'd learned logistics, by understanding the system, finding the inefficiencies, exploiting the gaps. I was being patient, being methodical, being quiet, and I was planning for the day when the system would release me back into the world where my son lived. 8 months in, I had a visitor. Not David, not Jessica, Ellen. She looked older, tired. She sat across from me in the visitation room with her hands folded on the table, trying to smile, trying to pretend this was normal. Hi. You look good. I didn't. I'd lost weight, gained muscle from work detail, and developed the kind of stillness that comes from having nowhere to go. How are you? She asked. I'm here. I mean, really, how are you? I'm here, Ellen. That's the answer. She nodded, looking down. David called me. He wanted me to convince you to accept visits. He can keep calling. He says he needs to talk to you. He had 2 years before this to talk to me. He didn't want to then. He's trying to make things right. No, he's trying to feel better about making things wrong. Ellen was quiet for a moment. Then, what happens when you get out? I go home. And then? And then I figure out what comes next. That's what I'm afraid of. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear there. She knew me well enough to know I wasn't idle. She knew I was planning something, even if she didn't know what. Don't be afraid. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything illegal. That's not what I'm worried about. Then what are you worried about? That you'll do something legal that destroys you anyway. I reached across the table and took her hand. First physical contact in 8 months. I'm going to be fine, I promise. You're lying. A little. She almost smiled. I miss you. I miss you too. Come home to me. Not to this. Not to whatever you're building in your head. Just come home. I will, when it's time. She left after an hour. I watched her walk away through the security doors, and I felt something shift inside me. Not doubt, not regret, but confirmation. Ellen was right to be afraid. Not of what I'd do to myself, but of what I was capable of doing to people who'd turned the system against me. I went back to my cell and added her concerns to my calculations. I'd need to be careful, precise, legal in every detail, moral in no way that mattered to anyone but me. The visits continued. Every month, David and Jessica drove 3 hours, filled out forms, waited. Every month, I refused. I imagined them in the car on the drive back, silent or arguing, processing the rejection, feeling the weight of it accumulate. 16 months of refusals. 16 months of messages sent through absence. At 18 months, I became eligible for parole. My record was clean, no infractions, no conflicts, model prisoner who worked in the library and kept to himself. The parole board interviewed me for 20 minutes, asked about my remorse, my plans, my understanding of what I'd done. I gave them what they wanted. Contrition, humility, a promise to rebuild relationships with my family, a commitment to therapy and anger management and all the other boxes they needed checked. They granted parole with conditions, regular check-ins, employment within 30 days, no contact with victims unless approved by my parole officer. Victims meant Jessica. Apparently David didn't count. My release date was set for 6 weeks out. Early morning, standard processing, supervised transport to the bus station. I'd serve the remaining 6 months under supervision, assuming I didn't violate parole. I sent word to Ellen. I didn't send word to David. But somehow, he found out. The Riverside project collapsed 3 weeks later. Not because of anything I did directly, but because the initial delays created a cascade of failures that Vanguard couldn't recover from. Investors pulled their partnership clause. Contractors walked off the job. The property sat half-finished, hemorrhaging money, a monument to mismanagement and bad timing. David's name was on the project. His reputation took the hit. I watched it happen from my desk at Interstate Logistics, processing the cancellation orders, coordinating the return of unused materials, documenting everything with professional detachment. Gary was frustrated. Losing Vanguard meant losing revenue. But he didn't blame me. What I'd done was just ease it along. Ellen noticed the change. Not in me, I was carefully consistent at home, but in David. He'd stopped calling her, stopped the pretense of family maintenance. She mentioned it one evening while we were watching television, some crime drama neither of us was really paying attention to. David hasn't called in 3 weeks. Maybe he's busy? Or maybe he knows. I looked at her. Knows what? That you're involved somehow. That his project failing isn't coincidence. I didn't sabotage anything. I did my job. That's not the same as saying you didn't help it fail. I'm not responsible for his success. You're his father. I was his father. He gave that up when he testified against me. Ellen muted the television. Do you hear yourself? You sound cold. I sound realistic. You sound like you've decided he's your enemy. He decided that first. I'm just responding accordingly. By destroying his career. By letting consequences happen. There's a difference. Not to him there isn't. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured water I didn't want just to have something to do with my hands. Ellen followed. When does this end? She asked. When they understand what they did? And how will you know when they understand? I'll know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Ellen leaned against the counter. I'm afraid of you. Not afraid you'll hurt me, but afraid of who you're becoming. This obsession, it's not obsession, it's patience. It's revenge. So what if it is? They took 18 months of my life. They took my reputation, my relationship with my son, my freedom, and you want me to just forgive that? I want you to not destroy yourself getting even. I'm not destroying myself. I'm rebuilding on my own terms. Those terms include destroying David. Those terms include letting David face the consequences of his choices. If that destroys him, that's his problem. Ellen stared at me. I don't know if I can watch this. Then don't, but I'm not stopping. She left the kitchen. I heard her go upstairs, heard the bedroom door close. I stood there alone, holding a glass of water, looking at my reflection in the darkened window. Raymond had been wrong about one thing. Revenge wasn't expensive. Revenge was patient, and I had nothing but time. The next morning, I received notification from Denise Cho, my parole officer. She wanted to see me, immediately, not a regular check-in, something specific. I drove to her office, arriving at the scheduled time, finding her waiting with a file folder and an expression that suggested this wasn't going to be comfortable. Mr. Coleman, sit down. I sat. I've received a complaint, she said. From who? Your son, David Coleman. He's claiming you've been harassing him through your work, that you deliberately took a job servicing his company to sabotage his projects. That's absurd. Is it? You work for Interstate Logistics. They service Vanguard Properties, where your son works. Your son's project recently failed. He's claiming you contributed to that failure. I did my job. I processed orders, coordinated deliveries, identified problems. If his project failed, it's because of his mismanagement, not my involvement. He says you identified a banking error that caused critical delays. I did. That's my job. Finding problems saves clients money in the long run. But it cost your son's project time they didn't have? That's not my responsibility. I work for Interstate, not Vanguard. My loyalty is to my employer, not to my estranged son. Denise studied me. This is starting to look like a pattern. What pattern? You took a job that just happens to intersect with your son's business. You just happened to identify a problem that hurt his timeline. His project just happened to fail shortly after you got involved. You're describing normal logistics work and calling it conspiracy. I'm describing behavior that looks like retaliation. Then you're seeing what you want to see. I'm doing my job. If that makes David uncomfortable, he can find a different supplier. Your parole conditions include maintaining employment and avoiding conflict with family members. I'm employed. I'm avoiding conflict. I don't contact David. I don't harass him. I process orders that happen to involve his company. That's not a violation. It's borderline. Borderline isn't illegal. Denise closed the file. I'm putting a note in your record. If I receive another complaint, we're going to have a more serious conversation. Do you understand? I understand. Good. Because if you violate parole, you go back inside. And this time, there's no early release. I left her office feeling the weight of scrutiny. David was trying to weaponize the system against me again, painting me as the aggressor, making my existence into evidence of wrongdoing. But he'd made a mistake. He'd shown his hand. He was scared. Good. He should be. At home, Ellen was packing a bag. What's this? I asked. I'm staying with my sister for a few days. Why? Because I can't watch this. I can't watch you spiral into whatever you're doing and pretend I'm okay with it. I'm not spiraling. Your son just filed a complaint with your parole officer. That's not nothing. It's harassment. He's trying to control me through official channels because he knows he can't control me any other way. Or he's scared. Or he's trying to protect himself. Or he actually believes you're targeting him. I am targeting him. Ellen stopped packing. What? I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, I took this job partially because it intersects with his business. Yes, I've been paying attention to his projects. Yes, I've let information flow in ways that don't help him, but I haven't done anything illegal. I haven't violated my parole. I'm just existing in proximity to his world, and that's making him uncomfortable. That's revenge. That's consequence. He wanted me removed from his life. Now I'm back, and he doesn't get to dictate the terms. Ellen picked up her bag. I love you, but I can't be part of this. You're not part of it. You're separate. Nothing's separate when it comes to family. He stopped being family when he put me in prison. And what are you now? I'm the lesson he refused to learn. Ellen walked past me, stopped at the door. When this is over, whatever this is, call me. If there's anything left of the man I married, I want to talk to him. There will be. I hope you're right. She left. I stood in the empty house, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of choices accumulating. Raymond had warned me about this, about spending everything on revenge and having nothing left when it was over. But Raymond had been wrong about the cost. The cost wasn't rage or obsession. The cost was becoming the kind of person who could do this and sleep at night. I was paying that cost willingly. Work continued. Interstate Logistics lost Vanguard as a client. They switched to a different freight forwarder, probably on David's recommendation. Gary was frustrated but philosophical. Clients came and went. That was business. I didn't lose my job. I just redirected my attention. Jessica had her consulting business, wellness and lifestyle coaching, website with testimonials and workshop schedules. I'd looked at it before, but now I looked closer. Her business was registered as a sole proprietorship. No LLC, no corporate protection, just her name and her social security number on all the paperwork. She held workshops twice a month, charged $200 per attendee, averaged 15 people per session, $6,000 a month in revenue. Not bad for part-time work, except the workshops weren't happening consistently. Her schedule showed gaps, sessions canceled, dates postponed, attendees refunded. The website testimonials were all dated from the previous year. Her social media had gone quiet. I wondered why. Then I found the reviews. They were buried on a wellness industry forum I'd never heard of, posted by anonymous users with usernames like disappointed client and wasted money. They were detailed, credible, and brutal. Jessica's workshops were described as disorganized, unhelpful, emotionally manipulative. She allegedly spent most sessions talking about her own trauma, the miscarriage, the stress, her recovery journey, while providing minimal practical advice. Attendees left feeling like they'd paid to be Jessica's therapist rather than receive coaching. The reviews were dated within the last 6 months, right around when I'd gone to prison. She'd tried to monetize her victim narrative, and it had backfired. I didn't post the reviews, I didn't spread them, I just made note of them, added them to the growing file of information I was accumulating about my son and his wife, a file I was beginning to think of as a blueprint. Gary called me into his office one afternoon, 3 months into my employment. He looked uncomfortable. We need to talk about something. Okay. I got a call from a lawyer representing David Coleman and his wife. They're threatening legal action if we don't terminate your employment. My chest tightened. On what grounds? They're claiming harassment, claiming your presence at a company that services their industry constitutes targeted stalking under state law. That's insane. That's what I told them. But they're serious. They've filed paperwork. They're building a case. So what are you saying? Gary leaned back. I'm saying I believe you. I think you're doing your job. I think they're paranoid or guilty or both. But I'm also saying I run a business and I can't afford a lawsuit over an employee who's been here 3 months. You're firing me. I'm asking you to resign. I'll give you references. I'll tell anyone who asks that you were competent and professional. But I can't keep you on with this hanging over us. This is David weaponizing the system again. Maybe, but it's effective. I stood up. When do you want me gone? End of the week. That gives you time to document your projects and transition. Understood. I left his office, went back to my desk, and spent the rest of the day cataloging everything I'd learned about Vanguard properties over the past 3 months. Delivery schedules, payment patterns, vendor relationships, project timelines, every piece of information that had passed through my desk. None of it was confidential. It was all commercially available data. But together, it painted a picture of a company that was stretched thin, over-leveraged, operating on narrow margins with very little room for error. David's career was built on sand. I just started digging around the foundation. By Friday, I'd cleaned out my desk, finished my transition documentation, and accepted a new position at a different logistics company across town. Smaller operation, less pay, no connection to Vanguard properties. David had won this round. He'd forced me out of proximity to his business, but he'd also shown me that he was reactive, defensive, and scared enough to hire lawyers, which meant he knew I was a threat, which meant I was doing something right. Ellen called that weekend. I answered on the third ring. Hi, how are you? I'm fine. How's your sister? She's good. I'm coming home. When? Tomorrow, but I need to know something first. What? Are you done? Have you gotten whatever you needed to get out of your system? I thought about lying, then decided she deserved honesty. No, I'm not done. What's left? Everything. I've barely started. Ellen was quiet for a long time. Then I'm coming home to pack more things. I can't live with this. I can't watch you destroy yourself trying to destroy them. I'm not destroying myself. You lost your job because of this. You're alienating everyone. You're so focused on revenge that you can't see what it's costing you. I see it clearly. I'm just willing to pay it. What about us? What about our marriage? That's your choice. I'm not asking you to be part of this. I'm just asking you not to stand in the way. That's not how marriage works. Then maybe we need to redefine what our marriage is. The cost was higher than I'd expected, but I was still paying it, because David and Jessica had taken everything from me, and I was going to make sure they understood what that felt like. One piece at a time. My new job was with a smaller outfit called Regional Freight Solutions. They handled manufacturing logistics, food service distribution, and commercial supply chain coordination. The pay was 20% less than Interstate, but they didn't ask questions about my previous employment beyond the basics. The manager who hired me was named Tony Valdez, 60 years old, former military, ran his operation like a disciplined machine. He reviewed my resume, called my references, and offered me the job in the same meeting. Gary Brennan says you're solid. That's good enough for me. I appreciate the opportunity. Don't thank me yet. This isn't a desk job. We're short-staffed, so you'll be doing everything. Scheduling, routing, customer service, warehouse coordination. You good with that? I'm good with that. Start Monday. I spent the weekend reorganizing my approach. David had successfully pressured Interstate into letting me go, which meant direct proximity to his business was a liability. Fine, I'd adjust. I couldn't target him through work, I'd target him through everything else. Jessica's consulting business was failing. I'd confirmed that through her website analytics, using publicly available SEO tools to check her traffic patterns. Her site visits had dropped 70% in the last 6 months. Her social media engagement was minimal. Her workshop calendar showed only 2 scheduled sessions in the next 3 months. She was hemorrhaging credibility. I didn't need to destroy it. I just needed to make sure it didn't recover. Monday evening, I created an account on the wellness forum where the negative reviews had appeared. Username, Concerned Professional. No photo, minimal profile, just another anonymous voice in a community that valued anonymity. I didn't post a review. I just started asking questions. Has anyone had experience with Jessica Coleman's workshops? I'm considering booking one, but want to make sure it's worth the investment. Responses came within hours. The existing critics came back, sharing their experiences in detail. Others who'd stayed quiet added their stories. The thread grew, accumulated weight, became searchable. When potential clients Googled Jessica's name now, they'd find this thread. They'd see the pattern of complaints. They'd book someone else. I wasn't lying. I wasn't defaming. I was just facilitating the spread of information that already existed. Ellen came home Tuesday. I was making dinner when she walked in. Pasta again, because I was good at exactly 3 meals, and this was one of them. She set her bags down but didn't unpack them. Hi. You're still here, she said. I live here. I mean, you're still on this path. Still planning whatever you're planning. I'm making dinner. Want some? Don't deflect. I turned off the stove. What do you want me to say? I want you to say you're done. I want you to say you've realized this is destroying you and you're walking away. I can't say that. Can't or won't? Both. Ellen sat down at the kitchen table, looking exhausted. I talked to David. My hands tightened on the spatula. When? Yesterday. He called me, asked if I knew what you were doing, asked if I could stop you. What did you tell him? I told him I don't know what you're doing, which is true. I know you're doing something, but I don't know what. Good. That's not good. That's me being honest that my husband has become a stranger. I served pasta onto 2 plates, brought them to the table, sat down across from her. I'm not a stranger. I'm just someone who learned that the system doesn't protect people who tell the truth. So you're becoming the system, fighting them the way they fought you? Something like that. And when does it end? When they understand. Understand what? What they did. What it cost. What happens when you destroy someone's life and expect them to accept it quietly? Ellen picked at her food. David sounded scared. Good. He said you're stalking them, following them, sabotaging their lives. I'm not stalking anyone. I'm living my life. If that makes them uncomfortable, that's their problem. He said Jessica's business is collapsing, that people are canceling workshops, that someone's spreading rumors about her. People don't need to spread rumors. They just need to share their experiences. Ellen looked up sharply. That was you. I didn't spread anything that wasn't already there. I just asked a question in a public forum. Jesus Christ. She monetized her victim story. It didn't work. That's not my fault. You're deliberately destroying her livelihood. I'm letting market forces respond to public feedback. She's the one who provided bad services. I just facilitated the conversation. Ellen pushed her plate away. You've become ruthless. I've become realistic. There's no difference. We ate in silence. After dinner, Ellen went upstairs. I heard water running, heard her moving around, heard the guest bedroom door close instead of the master bedroom. She was staying, but we weren't together. Not really. We were just two people living in the same house, waiting for something to break. At Regional Freight Solutions, I kept my head down and worked efficiently. Tony appreciated competence and didn't micromanage. I coordinated routes, solved logistical problems, kept shipments moving. I also paid attention. Regional serviced 3 restaurant supply companies. One of them distributed to a chain of upscale dining establishments owned by a restaurant group called Culinary Ventures. I recognized the name because I'd seen it on David's social media. He'd been tagged in photos at fundraiser events held at one of their locations. I made note of it, didn't act on it immediately, just filed it away. Patience wasn't passive. Patience was strategic waiting. 4 weeks into my new position, I received a message from Denise Cho. Another meeting, another complaint. I drove to her office, knowing what this was going to be before I arrived. Mr. Coleman, we need to talk. Let me guess, David filed another complaint. Jessica did this time. She's claiming you're cyber-stalking her, that you've created fake accounts to harass her business online. I haven't created any fake accounts. She has screenshots of forum posts asking about her services, posted by someone with a suspicious account. Asking questions in a public forum isn't harassment. It is if you're doing it with malicious intent to damage her business. I asked one question. Other people responded with their experiences. If those experiences are negative, that's her problem, not mine. Denise looked tired. You're dancing on a very thin line. I'm standing on the legal side of that line. Legally, maybe, but you're violating the spirit of your parole conditions. You're supposed to avoid conflict with family members. Jessica isn't family. She's my son's wife, and we've never had a relationship. I'm not contacting her. I'm not harassing her. I asked a question on a public forum that had nothing to do with her until other people brought her up. You knew what would happen. I suspected, but I can't be held responsible for other people's honest reviews. Denise leaned forward. Let me be clear. One more complaint, and I'm recommending parole violation. That means back to prison for the remainder of your sentence. Do you understand? I understand. Then stop. Whatever you're doing, however you're justifying it, stop. I'm living my life. That's all. You're playing games with people who've already proven they can put you in prison. That's not living your life. That's suicide. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. I was past caring about caution. I'd spent 18 months being careful, being compliant, being the person the system wanted me to be. It hadn't protected me then. It wouldn't protect me now. The only protection I had was making David and Jessica more afraid of what I might do than I was of what they could do to me. At home, Ellen was packing again. Going back to your sisters? No, going somewhere more permanent. My chest tightened. What does that mean? It means I can't do this anymore. I can't watch you destroy yourself. I can't be married to someone who's chosen revenge over everything else. I haven't chosen revenge over you? Yes, you have. Every time you put another piece of your plan into motion, you choose it over us. Over me. Over any future we might have had. Ellen, don't. I've made my decision. I'm filing for separation. Not divorce yet, but separation. Legal distance. So when this all falls apart, and it will, I'm not caught in the blast. You think I'm going to fail. I think you're going to succeed, and it'll destroy you anyway. That's worse. She zipped her suitcase, picked it up, looked at me with something that might have been sadness or might have been pity. I love you. I've loved you for 23 years, but I can't love what you're becoming. What am I becoming? Someone who values revenge more than redemption. Someone who's willing to lose everything just to make them lose something. They took everything first. And you're proving them right. They said you were dangerous, and now you are. She left. I heard her car start, heard the garage door open and close, heard silence fill the house. I was alone. Completely, intentionally, strategically alone. And I was fine with that. Because alone meant no one to protect, no one to worry about, no liability except myself. I poured a drink I didn't finish, sat on the couch in the dark, and thought about what came next. David's career was damaged, but not destroyed, not yet. I needed something bigger, something that would hit them both where they'd built their new life, their reputation, their social standing, their carefully constructed narrative about being victims who'd overcome tragedy. I needed to expose the foundation their story was built on, and I knew exactly how to do it. Chapter 7. The miscarriage records were sealed. Medical privacy laws, court orders, victim protection protocols, all designed to keep Jessica's health information confidential. I couldn't access them legally, and I wouldn't try. But the trial transcripts were public record. I'd never read them. I'd lived through the trial, sat through every session, heard every word of testimony. Reading the transcripts felt masochistic, but I downloaded them anyway, 300 pages of court stenography, and started reviewing them with the detachment of someone reading about a stranger's life. Jessica's testimony was on pages 47 through 93. She described the miscarriage in careful detail, the bleeding, the pain, the drive to the hospital, the moment doctors told her the baby was gone. She described the weeks leading up to it, the stress, the anxiety, the argument with me that had triggered her symptoms. She described me as aggressive, intimidating, deliberately cruel. David's testimony corroborated everything. He'd found her crying after I left. He'd held her while she had panic attacks. He'd watched her spiral into anxiety that culminated in the miscarriage. My defense attorney had tried to poke holes in the timeline, tried to establish that stress alone doesn't cause miscarriage, tried to present me as a concerned father who'd simply disagreed with his daughter-in-law's choices. The jury hadn't believed her. They'd believed Jessica. But reading the transcripts now, I saw something I'd missed during the trial itself. Small inconsistencies. Details that didn't quite line up. Jessica said the argument happened at 7 p.m. David said it happened at 8:30. Jessica said I'd raised my voice multiple times. David said I'd been consistently loud. Jessica said she'd immediately called her mother afterward. Phone records showed the call happened 2 hours later. Minor discrepancies. Nothing dramatic, but enough to suggest the testimony had been coordinated but not perfectly synchronized. I made notes, highlighted contradictions, built a timeline that showed the gaps. Then I started thinking about who might care. The answer wasn't law enforcement. They'd gotten their conviction. The case was closed. Raising questions now would just make me look like a bitter ex-con trying to retry a settled case. The answer wasn't the media. Local reporters had covered the trial, but it hadn't been newsworthy beyond a tragic local story about a miscarriage and a family destroyed. The answer was social media. Jessica had built her wellness business on transparency. She'd written blog posts about her healing journey. She'd given interviews to lifestyle websites about overcoming trauma. She'd positioned herself as someone who'd survived abuse and turned it into purpose. Her entire brand was built on being a victim. What would happen if people started questioning whether that narrative was accurate? I didn't need to convince everyone. I just needed to plant doubt in the right places, with the right people, in ways that looked like concerned questions rather than accusations. I created a timeline document. Not a conspiracy theory, just a careful layout of publicly available information. Trial testimony dates, phone records referenced in court, Jessica's own blog posts describing her experience, David's LinkedIn updates about work stress during the same period. I didn't draw conclusions, I just laid out the facts and let readers draw their own. Then I found a small investigative journalism blog that covered legal system failures. They'd publish stories about wrongful convictions, problematic testimony, cases where the narrative didn't match the evidence. I sent them the timeline with a simple message. I'm a man who was convicted of causing my daughter-in-law's miscarriage based on testimony that contains inconsistencies. I'm not asking you to prove my innocence. I'm just asking if anyone cares that the story doesn't add up. I didn't use my real name. I used an anonymous email account. I didn't expect a response. I got one 3 days later. The blogger was named Chris Hendricks, mid-30s, former legal researcher, had broken 2 significant stories about prosecutorial misconduct in the past year. His response was brief. Send me everything you have. No promises, but I'll look at it. I sent him the trial transcripts, the timeline, copies of Jessica's blog posts, archived versions of her business website. I sent him public records showing David's professional history, their property records, their financial filings. I didn't send speculation. I sent data. A week later, Chris published a preliminary article. The headline was careful. Questions surround miscarriage conviction in county case. The article didn't call Jessica a liar. It just pointed out inconsistencies in the testimony, noted the lack of medical evidence definitively linking stress to the miscarriage, and questioned whether the prosecution had proven causation beyond reasonable doubt. It included quotes from medical experts explaining that spontaneous miscarriage is common and rarely attributable to single events. It mentioned that the convicted man had maintained his innocence and had been denied the opportunity to present evidence about the relationship dynamics at trial. The article didn't get massive traffic, but it got noticed. Jessica's blog received comments, questions, polite at first, then more pointed, people asking for clarification about the timeline, people expressing sympathy but wondering about the details, people suggesting that maybe the story was more complicated than it seemed. She deleted the comments, made her blog private, locked down her social media, which made it worse, because now she looked like she was hiding something. David called Ellen. Ellen forwarded the message to me. "Your father is trying to destroy us. Tell him to stop or we're going to the police." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The message itself was evidence of panic. At work, Tony asked me about my background. "I don't care about your history, but if something's going to blow back on this company, I need to know." "Nothing will blow back?" "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." He studied me. "You've got something going on. I can tell. Just keep it away from here." "I will." But I wasn't sure how long I could maintain separation between my work life and my revenge project. Everything was bleeding together, boundaries dissolving, my existence becoming singular in purpose. Denise Cho called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Mr. Coleman, I need to see you immediately. Do not make me come find you." I went to her office the next morning. She was waiting with a printed copy of Chris's article. "This you?" "I don't know what you're asking." "Did you provide information to this blogger? Did you coordinate this article to damage Jessica's reputation?" "I provided publicly available information to someone who asked questions about a case I was involved in. That's not illegal. It's harassment. It's transparency. The trial transcripts are public. Jessica's blog posts are public. I didn't leak anything confidential." "You're using the press to intimidate your victims. I'm using the press to tell my side of a story that was never told fairly. That's my right." Denise leaned back. "I'm recommending parole violation. You've shown a clear pattern of targeting your son and his wife, and now you're escalating to public harassment." "I've broken no laws. I've violated no conditions. I've maintained employment, attended counseling, checked in as required. What you're calling harassment is me exercising my First Amendment rights." "Your rights don't include destroying someone's reputation because you're angry about your conviction?" "Actually, they do. As long as I'm not lying, as long as I'm not breaking laws, I can say whatever I want about whoever I want." "Not when you're on parole." "Show me the condition that says I can't talk about my own case." Denise stared at me. "You're playing a dangerous game. I'm playing by the rules you gave me. If the rules allow this, that's not my problem. It will be your problem when you're back in prison. Then I'll see you at the hearing." I left her office knowing I'd crossed a line, maybe not legally, but practically. David and Jessica would push for parole violation. Denise would recommend it. A judge would have to decide if providing information to a journalist constituted harassment. I gave it 50-50 odds, but I didn't stop. Chris published a follow-up article. This one included an interview with a medical expert who explained that 12-week miscarriages are typically caused by chromosomal abnormalities, not external stress. The expert said that while extreme trauma could theoretically contribute, a single argument would be highly unlikely to cause spontaneous miscarriage in an otherwise healthy pregnancy. The article also included a brief statement from my original defense attorney saying she'd tried to present this expert testimony at trial but had been blocked by procedural rulings. Jessica's wellness business website went completely dark. Domain parked, content removed, social media accounts deleted. David's LinkedIn profile was scrubbed of personal information. Just professional history now. No photos, no mentions of family, no personal narrative. They were circling the wagons. Ellen called me from wherever she was staying. "You need to stop. I'm not doing anything illegal. You're destroying them. I'm exposing the truth. Your truth, not necessarily the truth. The facts speak for themselves. The facts are that you spent 18 months in prison and now you're spending the rest of your life getting revenge. When does it end? when they admit what they did. They'll never admit it. You're smart enough to know that. Then it doesn't end. Ellen was quiet for a long time. I'm filing for divorce. Okay. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say? You made your choice. I respect it. I want you to say you'll stop. I want you to say you choose me over this. I can't choose you over this. This is who I am now. Then we're done. She hung up. I sat there holding a silent phone, feeling the last connection to my old life sever. I was alone, completely, permanently, and I was fine with that, because I didn't need anyone. I just needed time, patience, and access to information. The parole violation hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Denise had filed her recommendation. David and Jessica had filed supporting statements. I'd hired a lawyer, not Patricia Vernon this time, someone cheaper who specialized in parole issues. His name was Dennis Morton, 50 years old, former public defender, had the worn-down competence of someone who'd spent decades fighting losing battles. "You've got a weak case," he said after reviewing everything. "How weak?" "You didn't break any explicit conditions, but you've clearly been targeting your son and his wife through indirect means. A judge could interpret that as violating the spirit of your parole." "Can they send me back for violating the spirit of something?" "They can if they want to. Parole is discretionary. They don't need to prove you committed a crime. They just need to show you're not rehabilitated." "So I'm screwed." "Maybe. Or maybe we argue that you have a First Amendment right to speak about your own case, that providing information to journalists is protected speech, that your son and his wife are trying to weaponize the parole system to silence you." "Will that work?" "Depends on the judge." I spent the 3 weeks preparing for both outcomes, freedom or prison. If I went back inside, I'd lose 6 months. If I stayed out, I'd have 6 months to finish what I'd started. Either way, time was running out. David and Jessica knew it too. They were scared enough to be aggressive, which meant they were making mistakes. And I was waiting for them to make the one mistake that would give me everything I needed.